Welcome to Civilization Stories, where we explore alternatives to history through the lens of the world's most addictive video game. A few weeks ago, I published a video sharing my impressions of Civ VII's Test of Time update. In it, I explored the pleasant surprises as well as the persistent frustrations that I encountered playing as Alexander of Siam. Many viewers offered their feedback, and one theme that kept coming up was how I played my game relative to what I put on my plate in choosing to lead a Civ like Siam as a leader like Alexander. When I pointed out my frustrations with the game, several commenters said things like, "Well, what did you expect?" Or, "If you do this bad thing, there are bound to be consequences." Or, my favorite was suggesting that I didn't bother to learn the game and then got upset when the game didn't do what I wanted. So, before I get into my continuing impressions of the Test of Time update playing as Ben Franklin of America, I want to address what it means for someone like me, presenting a video of the game, to have and share their impressions. Fans of the channel will know that I, just like you, represent a particular Civ avatar, a type, if you will. Because I'm such a fan of the series, I've developed my own style of playing the game. It's based on a lot of history and many hours of playing a variety of Civ games. I need no introduction to the basic concepts of the game. I don't need tutorials or advisors, and I start playing on a high difficulty level using failure as my means to understanding how to play better. I'm devoted to the single player experience. I have an aggressive playstyle. I don't try to outpace the AI or beat it at its own game. Instead, my goal is to unsettle my rivals until I overtake them. I keep my economy balanced, meaning I don't prioritize science, culture, gold, or any one yield type over another, no matter who I am playing as. I don't worry about victory conditions until it's time to start winning the game, and that usually only happens after I've achieved my goal of becoming the world's foremost superpower. I always aim to be a massive, powerful, sprawling empire that has the world's highest and most productive population. Optimization or min-maxing never enters into my equation of how to play the game. For example, in some versions of the game, those I know well, I prefer playing with yield icons turned off. In Civ 6, I feel that most of the UI mods that many YouTubers trust and recommend, detailed map tax comes to mind, I regard as antithetical to the experience. I understand that one argument is that they are designed to make the game easier to understand. I would argue that they make the game easier to play. And I don't need detailed map tax to beat the AI harder. I'm unconcerned with winning the game in few turns. I'm focused exclusively on fun. I've heard it argued that Civ 6 is too board gamey. Truthfully, my big worry is that the Civilization video games, starting with Civ 6 and extending with Civ 7, are becoming too spreadsheety. In some of my previous videos where I investigate the min-maxer and the player feedback problems, I talked about how decision-making is being stripped away from Civ games. In Civ 7, focused on yields like never before, demands one key decision, and that is, what's your combo? In my previous video about Civ 7, I pointed out how the game sends mixed messages. For example, in the exploration age, I completely dominated the game. I met my goals when it came to fulfilling my mission according to that avatar I described, an aggressive player focused on unsettling the AI. I understood that I had spent most of the game at war and that I was incurring penalties as a result that needed to be offset. What I didn't like was that when the modern age emerged, my economy, which had been running smoothly a turn earlier, because of the age change, was now completely in the tank. Criticisms from some commenters was that it was I and my decisions that tanked my economy and that I got what I deserved. My defense, or argument against this position, was that the game was sending me feedback that I was doing just fine until it decided to punish me for my decisions. My decision, specifically, to run a war economy. My main gripe was that the developers at Firaxis had in some way built into the game a way to discourage players from going to war, or at least winning wars and subjugating the people of other nations. This had, to an extent, always been the case, now highlighted even more by the Test of Time update. Commenters who were critical of what I had to say in my video might have been left with the impression that I lost. They seemed to ignore the fact that I won my game, and pretty handily at that. Let me be clear that my criticisms of the updates to the mechanics and balances in the Test of Time have nothing to do with my lack of understanding of how to play Civ. My criticisms come from my disappointment at the continued development of the game, driving it toward being more spreadsheety, that coddles those who prefer to exclusively play tall, leans into the idea of driving yields, and that punishes a certain Civ avatar that resembles myself. Keeping all of that in mind, let's take a look at my game as Ben Franklin of America. Obviously, because of how I played my previous game as Alexander of Siam, I decided to take a different approach. I vowed to concentrate more on avoiding conflict, maintaining strong relationships, and building a robust economy. If I were to go to war, it would be only in defense or to come to the aid of allies. If I could, I would aim to win the game through any means feasible that was not domination. But I would strive to always be at or near my settlement limit. Keep that in mind. Because I want to talk more about the current state of Civ 7, I will try to blaze through this alternative to history in order to focus on aspects of the game that I think will be of particular interest to players who are keen to keep an eye on the development and direction of Civ 7. And one last thing before I get going, I could end up pointing out a lot of things that I think are terrible. And you know what? Just so it's not an issue, I'm going to place this timestamp up in the corner for the rest of this video so people can go back and refer to this moment in case they ever lose the plot. Civ 7 is in the best state it has ever been and is finally a legitimate entrant in the Civ series. So now, if you feel the need to comment on how I'm a Civ hater, come back to this point in the video and ask yourself if that's really true. Is it perfect? Oh, no. Do I need it to be perfect? Also, no. Am I pointing out problems that persist and that should be addressed to make the game more fun? You betcha. Okay, let's get going. This time around, I was very careful to choose the new map type, fractal continents, which is different from the old and problematic fractal map. I will continue to point this out. Every single crisis type needs to be individually disabled in the advanced settings before each game. For players like me who prefer to play without the crisis mechanic, this is tedium that need not exist. If someone at Firaxis is watching this, please make a single disable all toggle for crises. The first 40 turns or so were as you'd expect, exploring my continent, settling new towns, and keeping ornery independent powers at bay. I shared my continent with Gilgamesh, Jose Rizal, and Hatshepsut of the... I'm not 100% sure. I still see that as a problem because with civs and leaders decoupled, developers should strive to make it more obvious than ever. And I need to stress that the game is called Civilization, not Leader. I built the Great Stela in the city of Washington. I also built the Oracle. By turn 84, I was up to 4 of my 6 settlements, with more settlements set to be added to my cab. But I was effectively blocked off or out of room for decent settlement spots. Please don't hate me. A man cannot change his nature, and I am an aggressive player that seeks to unsettle the AI. So, after forming an alliance with Gilgamesh, it was time to find new settlements to add to my empire. And in the war against Egypt, admittedly, I drew first blood. In the war, I did what I needed to do. But in Washington, I also built the Colosseum. For my syncretism choice, I chose the Greek Acropolis. I had built 3 wonders in Washington and thought that the culture adjacency they offered to the Acropolis would be useful. Focused on capturing Rome and believing I could get Hatshepsut out of this game, because I was on good relations with the rest of my neighbors, I went to war again. You know who dealt the first major blow to Egypt this time around? It wasn't me. It was my good pal Gilgamesh who captured Ravenna that turn. My fleet cut off the strait between Rome and Aquileia, but our assault on the well-defended capital was a slog. I did, however, manage to capture it before the end of the age. Then, with my soldiers storming the last Roman stronghold, the age just ended. Ugh. So then we jump from 860 BC to 480. This will always be the major stumbling block for this game. How has there not been a developer or a modder or a YouTuber who has figured this out? But in what version of history does a mob knocking on the door of the enemy just stop for over 1,000 years? I'm not sure how it happened, but I somehow forgot to record my playthrough at the start of the Exploration Age. But rest assured, I conquered Aquileia and eliminated Hatshepsut pretty much the very next turn. Anyway, my playthrough picks up here on turn 57 of the Exploration Age. Life is fine, my alliance with Gilgamesh is strong, I've met Catherine of Siam, Friedrich of Greece, Said al-Hurra of Buganda, and Caesar of the Ottomans. I'm a pretty strong empire. I have 10 of my possible 11 settlements. My yields, the yields, are fine, I guess. I may have built some other wonders in those 57 turns, I can't remember. Since my vanquishing of Hatshepsut and the Romans, I've been at peace. The only point dragging things a bit is I have no distant land settlements, and there really is very little land left to settle. Oh, I definitely built at least one wonder, the Tomb of Aschia in the city of Rome. By about that time, too, I had obviously had a bunch of celebrations because I was running 11 government policies. For my syncretism choice, I chose the Norman donjon. Oh, that's where the word dungeon comes from. Yay, I'm smarter now. Actually, let's push this literary relationship even further. I wonder if the character of Don Juan, sounds like Don John, might be so named as to represent a symbolic female prison of desire toward the repulsive, albeit seductive, traits of the manipulative, pleasure-seeking male. The human brain is primed to seek patterns. Anyway, moving on. Alliances are good for Ben Franklin because his unique ability provides bonuses for alliances, but it means war with the enemies of your friends. But it's okay since we weren't above our settlement cap. Let's go capture some settlements. Alliances can bring war, but they can also lead to more alliances. Yay, quadruple alliance. War with so many friends was easy, and we captured the Ottomans' coastal city of Adana. Catherine of Siam was doing most of the heavy lifting against the Ottomans on the mainland, but my fleet went on to capture Trabzon, pushing my settlements to 14 of 14. Once again, I lost part of my playthrough. I think the culprit this time was a full hard drive that forced my screen recording to quit without my noticing. But starting my next session, the recording picks up about 16 turns into the modern age. And this is what I remember. After absolutely killing it in the exploration age, including completing both the tech and civics trees, by the time the new age started, my cities were useless again. Resource slots in my cities evaporated into thin air. I had great relationships with Catherine, Gilgamesh, Jose Rizal, and Sayyid al-Hura, so that was good. Along with my friends, I had captured Constantia and eliminated Caesar and the Ottomans. Only Friedrich of the Greeks remained as one of my enemies, but we were pretty comfortably moving along. My yields and build times in my cities had been stellar by the end of the exploration age, only to be slashed by the start of the modern age. It wasn't as bad as when I played as Alexander of Siam. My economy wasn't in the tank, but I recall it being a shock to think how far behind I very suddenly felt at the start of the new age. But I was confident that there was just something I was missing, and that now that the world was at peace, my progress would slingshot forward. This time around, because I had some money saved up, I was able to get some explorers out to go artifacts hunting. Still, there were times when I found it shocking that some of my oldest cities, Boston for example, who had been a production powerhouse for centuries, now needed 153 turns to build a laboratory or an opera house. Resource micromanagement and trying to understand why some cities had more or less resource slots became my temporary obsession. Krung Thep. I'll try to get back to that in the conclusion. About 40 turns in and I thought I was doing pretty well, but looking at the victory screen, apparently not. I built Sultanate Kamai in the city of Washington, which I think was now home to 6 wonders, maybe 7? Forced into a difficult diplomatic decision, in typical American fashion, I chose to pursue communism as an ideology. By turn 56, my yields were good. I was running an uninterrupted cycle of celebrations leading to my having filled 14 policy slots. But my buddy Gilgamesh went to war with Friedrich. Gilgamesh was my oldest friend, so it was time to go to war again. No big deal. Friedrich was the odd man out of our world alliance. I built the Eiffel Tower in Washington. Nice town. Helping Gilgamesh in his war against the Greeks, my troops captured the town of Lindos. Invading the Greek mainland with my fleet and reserve troops, I thought I had done enough to capture Athens, but I just couldn't find all of those dang defensible districts. Now deep into Greek territory, my troops captured the Greek capital, Chalkis. Suddenly, now, my fleet could recognize those other defensible districts. Tracking down that last district took forever, and in the end I found it mostly by accident. Except that pushed me above my settlement cap for the first time. Soon after, I captured Thera, putting me 2 settlements over my cap. That would be fine for a while, so I made peace. Needing to support Gilgamesh again to keep my alliance, I had to go back to war against Friedrich. I'd gotten my science and culture yields up to almost 2,000 and 1,000 respectively, which I thought was pretty good. My wars were mostly for political reasons. And then I won the game. Charts, charts, charts. Game tells me I was terrible even though I won. I tried to play scientific and cultural, but I won a domination victory. Okay, here we go. Problem number 1. Do you see it? I'll give you a second. Do you see what I'm going to gripe on? How did I win a domination victory? How? Is this the new barrier to success, being 1 settlement over the settlement cap? I played most of this game just clicking on city build queues. The only time I really ran into resistance was trying to capture Rome. That was it. Of the 300 or so total turns of this game, I spent maybe 75 of them actually at war. The game took me like 10 hours to play, and most of it I did from a cafe in Seoul waiting for a flight. During the Exploration Age, almost all of my leftover troops from the Antiquity Age I never even bothered to upgrade. Ditto the Modern Age. They just sat there. As far as the other victory conditions were concerned, I was fifth, ahead, a guess of only Friedrich. Did I play poorly? If I played poorly, why did I win? The major gripe across all civilization games since the 90s is that the AI is incompetent. If I won the game and was losing in every win condition but domination, I'm sorry. From my point of view, the AI is incredible at this game. Now, I know I'm coming across like I just don't understand the game. It's not that. When I say all these kinds of things, when I perpetually question why, it's because I fail to understand how developers and even some players don't see these problems. For anyone who's ever shit on Civ 6, hear me now. The various ways by which you could win the game, scientific, cultural, religious, diplomatic, and domination, were more or less equal in their complexity and the rigor with which it took to achieve. In this game, on deity difficulty, I won a domination victory, essentially by accident. Let that sink in. In my city of Washington, I think I built 8 wonders. I'm sure there's a pretentious Civ player out there scoffing, I always build at least 16 wonders in my capital city. Bravo. I point this out just to say that I think my games prove that wonder building is not essential at all to win games. Building 8 in my capital and a few others in other places, along with my codices, relics, and artifacts that I worked so much more toward than conquering my enemies, had me in 5th. Just trying to reach my settlement limit helped me win the game. The gestalt is all wrong. If you go back and look at some of my early videos where I talk about the problems with Civ 7's victory conditions, I hope you'll find that this has always been a problem with the game, and even after the Test of Time update, it persists. Charts don't improve the situation. This gives the illusion of demonstrating to me how well I played, but it doesn't help me at all, because I won, but I sucked, and I won without really trying, on the game's hardest difficulty level. All this makes me think of is all of the players out there, probably now noses flung to the air, saying to themselves, he did this wrong, he did this wrong, and he did this wrong. I won. What do you want? I'm sure YouTube videos exist out there like understanding cities and towns, or the ins and outs of resource management in Civ 7, or city management tips, or why this leader or this Civ is OP. None of it matters. You can win just by reaching your settlement cap by the modern age. But maybe the min-maxers are right, and I'm the problem. The way I see it is that developers of Civ 7 have run into the problem of conflating the ideas of complicated and convoluted. Try to stay with me here. And remember that timestamp is still up in the corner if you need reminding. Every civilization game has been complicated. There are many working parts that are all integrated into a whole, and there's no direct path to victory. It's not snakes and ladders. You have to think, strategize, and outwit your opponents. Not just roll dice and hope. But at some point, players of the game got to the point where, because the rules were fixed, no dice needed to be rolled, and so there was no element of chance, they figured they could beat the game. Beating the design of the game feels like the very definition of the spreadsheet game. If more were left to chance or gamesmanship, then the spreadsheet could not be understood, memorized, and then defeated. This is what actually makes board games kind of nice. It's not office work turned into fun. For me, the real downfall and full embrace of the spreadsheet happens when the game focuses and pushes to the fore the yield. Yields dominate the Civ zeitgeist, and it's beginning to drive me crazy. In Civ 6, there was a certain controlled chaos in the yield management. If you were able to generate 1,000 of a particular yield, you won. Now, getting to 1,000 science or culture generation is a minimum barrier to be able to compete with the AI, apparently. I try to avoid looking at the HUD ribbons during the game and comparing myself to the AI because they are meaningless. The AI will always have yields that defy belief. And obviously, as my playthrough proves, you don't need to out-yield the AI to win easily. So I'm going to posit an idea for developers to explore to better measure one's progress against the AI. But first, a couple of quick other things, small stuff. I want to remind people that I do like the fact that you can play as one civilization now for the entire game. But I'd really like the skins during the game to be connected to the civilizations and not to their leader. For example, Gilgamesh always has that navy and orange skin similar to Sumer from Civ 6, even if he's leading, in this case, Iceland. Ditto Catherine, always yellow and black despite leading Siam. Remember, the game is called Civilization, not Leader, so each Civ should have their own colors and skins, not the leader. This would give players a much clearer understanding right from the start exactly who their rivals are. The leader icons are always in the top right corner anyway, so we always know who we're playing against. America are fine, but I think every civilization with a modern apex age is going to run into this problem that their unique abilities get a little less time to marinate and be impactful. I'm not sure I built or used a single Marine. I thought the Prospector was actually a pretty cool unit that I think is worth having in other ages. Only having them in the modern age was kind of tough since most, if not all of the land was already claimed. Rail Yard and Rail Station did lead me to make a couple of errors, but that's a bit on me. Statue of Liberty is a pointless wonder in my opinion. Ben Franklin is fine, though I hate looking at him or thinking I'm in that body. His leader ability includes bonuses for every endeavor that you start or support. This basically means that in order to play well as Ben Franklin, you have to constantly engage with the diplomacy screen. Fuck. I'm an introvert. Leave me alone. I know that Civ 7 looks beautiful, but they made a huge misstep when it came to the effectiveness and look of urban city sprawl compared to the natural environment. Like, what is even going on here between Beijing, Kunming, Holar, and Logar? This urban sprawl between Suzhou, Wuchang, and Beijing? I mean, I was just in China, and it is very urban, but even I think this looks excessive. It's probably an unsolvable problem, but a lesson to designers of strategy games that the beauty of the environment at the start of the game needs to be better preserved, and the ratio of urbanization to untouched wilderness needs to be better balanced than in Civ 7. The modern era has always represented a problem for Civ designers. At that point, the game can become a series of specialist placements or growth events, followed by watching a cutscene of a volcano eruption and then engaging oh so briefly with the diplomacy screen. Maybe natural disasters and such should wane in their impact across ages as volcanoes become dormant and rivers become tameable. I still hate the Explorer lens and the fact that my ability to engage with it depends on the quality of my eyesight, which is admittedly pretty poor. And I think if Explorers were much cheaper to build but could perform an artifact extraction only once or twice, it would be an improvement. Lastly, it's a small thing, but going back to Krung Thep, one of the things that Civ 7 has seemed to always strive to do is give players a deeper, more specialized understanding of history and cultures. So, for anyone wondering why I bring up the subject of Krung Thep, basically the whole world outside of Thailand refers to Krung Thep as Bangkok. I've complained in the past that they should just call it Bangkok in the game. But what would maybe make it more fun or interesting is if you play as Siam, then the city's name is Krung Thep. But if you play as America, as I did, then it's called Bangkok, as any American would call it. Same for some of those Greek cities, or calling it Rome instead of Roma. Just a thought. Okay, so going back to this idea of measuring a player's progress versus the AI while playing. The problem here, just to reiterate, is in calculating yields. Playing on higher difficulties, the AI receives certain advantages over the human player. This is totally normal. One advantage they have is in generating yields across the board. So, seeing the AI's yields being higher than the human players is totally normal, but players tend to think of high yields as doing well versus doing poorly, i.e. low yields. But yield measurement is nothing more than a complex set of calculations based on what the human player and the AI opponents have done with the tools at their disposal relative to the hand they were dealt. All of Civ 7's city management has made this calculus all the more robust. The algorithm has widened. On some level, spreadsheet players might like this aspect of Civ 7. Widening the algorithm deepens the code to crack. The problem is, in widening the algorithm and deepening its complexity, it has short-circuited its logic systems and made the final calculation more error-prone and its behavior more unpredictable. Players want the outcome of their games to make sense. So-and-so did really well, and I couldn't overtake them. I should have done this instead. Losing that way is better than, oh, I won? But how? And in the end, widening the algorithm, attempting to deepen its input, makes the game a mathematician's game. And while there is nothing wrong with that as a component to a complex game, focusing on that as the key path to success and enjoyment through the game makes yield generation not more complicated, but simply more convoluted. In so doing, it ignores the fact that the best games are very simple, but never unfold the same way because players have to manage their opponent's choices against their own. Chess is not a math problem, nor is poker. The analogy would be that focusing on yield generation is like playing poker where the only thing that matters is what cards a player has dealt. Good card players know that the cards in a player's hand don't really matter all that much. So, what am I getting at? Well, obviously, it's clear that I'm not the biggest fan of yields being civilization's centerpiece. But what I would like to see is a set of ways to measure a player's progress through the game because the HUD ribbons do not cut it. I know that there are numerous screens that allow players to stare into the spreadsheet, but again, that's only good for the spreadsheet players, the mathematicians. Instead, how can you give a casual, visually interested player better feedback on how they're doing? In the past, Civ games had screens to see demographic information like which Civ had the highest population, which had the most cities, which Civ had the most productive people, etc. Personally, one thing I liked that old Civ games had was the top 5 cities screen. Now, while this really only ranked cities by how many wonders were in the city, I think ranking the top 5 or even 10 cities and why they are ranked the way they are would give players an insight into their progress relative to their opponents. Now, I know folks are going to scream at me like, it's all right there. It's in the victory condition screen, you numbskull. I know, I get it. But it's all numbers. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there are 0 non-numeric representations to progress in Civ 7 because empire size is, as we know, off the table. Generally speaking, I think Golden Ages could have been a good way to track progress in Civ, but in Civ 7, they are absolutely meaningless. There has rarely been a time where my citizens have not been celebrating. I regard the bonus option I get every 10 turns as just part of my government. Oh, and governments and celebrations, by the way, are so lazily implemented in Civ 7. They really found a perfect symmetry in Civ 6 and how to run governments, with a standard base of policies you could run as civilizations advance through the tech and civics tree, with extra slots being available through certain wonders. But now, your government is strictly the policies you're running. Plus, you get to run an extra policy for every celebration, meaning that by the end of the age, I'm running 15 to 20 policies. But once you advance to the next age, all of those policies just disappear. Governments become incompetent between ages, and it kills the player's feeling of progress. Now, I know that update 1.4.1 has rolled out and made changes to this system. I guess we'll see how it works out, but the government/celebration mechanic at the moment is terrible. Basically, everything in the game is super weak, and all you're trying to do is accumulate bonuses. Yeah, if I had to break down Civ 7 into one simple idea, it's that. It's a race to accumulate bonuses. And all those bonuses do is widen the math and make the algorithms that dictate your progress more convoluted. At no point in the game are you forced to make a decision whereby accomplishing that one goal could dramatically alter your fortunes. I feel like in every Civ game there were moments that were like that, rushing to build a certain wonder or beelining toward a particular tech in order to get that spike. That does not happen in Civ 7. Just stack bonuses, keep generating marginally larger yields. Oh, and by the way, the other thing that was nice about previous Civ games was that your yield progress was incremental. Now, I find that, in the modern age anyway, my yields can fluctuate by 200 or 300 per turn. I guess this usually happens when you're generating over 1,000, again, the minimum barrier of entry to stay competitive, of a particular yield, and then you have a percentage bonus, usually from an endeavor that expires. And in diplomacy, there's no reminder or screen asking if you would like to continue running said deal. And of course, there's no way to set up some kind of reminder for something that important. So you're forced to just remember. Again, it makes the game all the more convoluted and spreadsheety. Anyway, in short, I think developers need to find a way to distill the objectives of Civ 7 from a developer's standpoint and find a better way to communicate it to players. Developers need to ask the question, how do we want players to play the game, a standard game? What do we want the average player to experience through a standard playthrough of Civ 7? Right now, it seems that what drives Civ 7 is yield generation. More yields, more calculations, bigger numbers, more robust algorithms, larger spreadsheet. Because what you build, that stuff you're supposed to believe in, doesn't matter when you win a domination victory simply by hitting your settlement cap. Thanks for watching, and remember to keep playing and making your own civilization story, your own amazing path through history, and I'll see you next time.